might say I got a free bowl of soup with this hat last year at the finals, and they may absolutely be correct. But if it ain't broke, we ain't fixing it here. Welcome in to more playing games with teams that everyone hates. And who better to break down games we hate than Bryan Power in the house here, as is double R1L Steve Merril here. And yes, I am wearing the obscure Miami Heat hat here just to represent here because I am not quite sure it's going to go as well this year as it did a year ago. But we keep our fingers crossed. Dan behind the scenes, we know who he's rooting for here tonight. So we got a lot riding here for bragging rights. And I'll start with you here, BP. Number one. You like this hat, don't you? I know you've been making comments. You want, because I might burn it as soon as this show is over with here tonight.
Well, Joe, it's nice to see you brought out your Friday night Ocean Drive attire. We all see how Joe goes out to the clubs there in Miami, I think. But look, as a neutral, I'm excited. Yes, this is nice. We've got the producer on the one side, the host on the other side. And in true gutless Bryan Power fashion, I'll tell you, I'm kind of liking the over in this game. So you guys can fight it out. Who covers the spread and or advances, gets that 7 seed. Look, I know that Miami, it has been an under team for the bulk of the season, particularly on the road. But look how they finished, Joe. 9-1 to the over the last 10 games. And when you look at Embiid being back for Philadelphia, I think that means the numbers show, at least, that means more offensively than it does defensively. Now, the under trend is very real in these playing games. Steve may or may not hit on that when he's wants to when it's his turn to talk. But this is a low number, guys. And I know the last 3 meetings in the regular season between these teams, 214, 189, 213. 2 of those 3 still go over the total, right? So I think this number is too low. And I think as much attention is being paid to Embiid, rightfully so, the player to watch tonight for Philadelphia, if they're able to cover the spread, it's going to be because they get a big game from Tyrese Maxey, who had some big games against the Heat in the regular season. So I think Maxey's point total is the one to watch if you're in the prop market. But if you're just looking for a straight play here, I would lean over Sixers Heat, a very low number here.
I'm just, is it now time for Steve Merril to talk? I wasn't sure if you were doling out free passes here or not, but I tend to agree with you when it comes to Maxey here. I'm not sold Embiid is 100%, but I kind of agree with you because I do believe there is no way Miami wants to make this a half-court game tonight. So they have certainly upped the tempo, Merril, which is why this team, I believe, 9-1 to the over in the last 10 here. So, and it makes sense. I don't want a half-court game because I really, Bam's going to cover Embiid? We know better than that here. So I tend to agree with BP, shockingly enough, but look at the hat I'm wearing. So what the hell does that tell you? So what do you think of this game here tonight? Are you in agreement?
The key is you said hat because I felt bad going back to the hat. I've got some comedy gold, Jerry, gold to work with here on the show today. And so I was like, do I be professional or do I go back to the hat? You said hat, so I can go back to the hat. I appreciate the segue. Yes. A great Caddyshack reference from over 40 years ago. Most of our viewers were not born with the free bowl of soup. It was my friend, Mr. Wang. Don't tell him. No offense.
That's right.
It's good on you. Yeah, but and who are we kidding, Bryan? Joe is not allowed in any clubs anymore on South Beach, so he can wear that hat as much as he wants.
Yeah, that's a
good best line. Though, my first line before we started was going to be that Joe obviously thought this was a radio-only show today when he put that hat on. So there we go. Now he's allowed in. Ice Baby. Man.
Now I'm in.
That's only 30 years ago. Some of our viewers were born when Ice Baby came out over 30 years ago, 35. He's rehabbing houses in your neck of the woods, Joe. He does a good job.
Yes.
Rip Van Winkle. Back to the Miami Heat. It might not matter it does matter who wins this game because they get the Knicks. They get the 7 seed. They get the Knicks. Otherwise, they're going to be the 8 seed at best, even if they get in, and that'll be the Celtics. So it's a pretty important game for that reason. But both these teams make the playoffs because the loser gets a second chance at home on Friday against either the Bulls or Hawks, 2 sub-500 teams, which Bryan Power will talk about here in a little bit. But Bryan did bring up a good point about the under, and we talked about this when we all did the show Monday. Heavy money moves on both unders for the Tuesday games. They both went down 4 to 5 points from 228 down to 223 range, and they both stayed well under that still last night on Tuesday. I've got a little bit of a different take on the Bulls-Hawks total, which we'll talk about in a moment. But I think whenever we have quality teams playing, and these are two quality teams, the under is worth a look in these playoff intensity type games. Now, it's been priced in. It's several baskets lower than the recent meeting, and for good reason. Philadelphia tied for 6th and 5th, but they got 7th because of the three-way tiebreaker. They otherwise are not even in the play-in round. And, of course, if Embiid misses just one less game over that 20-game span, they're not in the play-in round. So this is a quality team. The 7th seed, very misleading. We've seen what they've done since they've come back with Embiid. They've been very good. In fact, the recent run has been impressive straight up, but it's been even better against the spread. This is a team that's now won 8 straight, but they've covered 10 in a row. 10-0 ATS their last 10. And you look at when they step up in class, they played Orlando, won by 12, played your Miami Heat, Joe, on the road, as you know, April 4th, won that game outright by 4 as a 2.5-point dog. That total, once again, was about a basket higher. It landed 214. Oklahoma City, right before that, they beat by 4. And you have to go all the way back to late March since they've last lost a game. Meanwhile, Miami, they've also played good basketball down the stretch. They're on a 7-3 run, I believe, their last 10. But look at the 3 losses. They lost to Dallas by 19. They lost to another playoff team at Indiana by 2, and they lost to Philly, as I just mentioned. So they haven't exactly stepped up in class like Philly has. I think that'll be the difference tonight. I would lean towards Philadelphia. Now, it opened 4.5, was bet up to 5 when I did my overnight video breaking down the games here on WagerTalk TV for this morning. Now it's 5.5. So it's getting pricey, but I do think that's been some sharp money pushing it higher.
Yeah, and while it makes sense, I mean, Philadelphia certainly has been the better team and more consistent, even without Embiid for that matter. But playoff Miami people here in the chat room as Leg Show in the house, as is Titan CT. And you know, Big Daddy, as well as I do, Miami is tough, very tough in this spot here to go against, especially. And I think here, call me crazy, BP, I would not be shocked if this thing gets to 6.5 before it's all said and done. But there's going to be a line in the sand where Miami money will buy this thing back. What do you think that number is? 6 here tonight, BP?
Yeah, maybe it gets to 6.5. I understand that no one's flocking to the window to bet the Heat right now. I didn't want to really bet it at 4.5. So to Steve's point, I'm not running to lay the points with the Sixers. Obviously, the Heat do have the pedigree from the run last season. So, yeah, I mean, I think 6.5 is the highest we could possibly get. I don't know if we're going to get to 6.5, maybe 6, but yeah, I guess that's where we stop there.
I think it'll cut down at 6. I think you'll start to see the buyback there tonight with Miami, but I am in agreement with you here. Playoff Jimmy tends to show up right around this time here, Merril, and we got a guy named Miami Heat in the chat room who is telling me he's afraid the Sixers are covering tonight here. Absolutely not. Hold the faith, brother. Hold the faith. I wouldn't bet them, but hold the faith here because I just don't see things are going to work out all that well. But no Rozier tonight. We know Duncan Robinson's going. So for the most part, Merril, all the full complement is here to go. Do you agree, though, the better way to look maybe at this? Also, some team totals. Miami was a very good first half team this year against the number. I can't see them trying to get this game to a crawl. I think they're going to have to shoot some threes. I think Hero's going to have to be good to go. That team total looks really appetizing as well here, Merril.
Yeah, keep in mind, when these teams played a month ago, March 18th, the total was 206. It landed 98-91, 189, but both Embiid and Butler missed that game, so you really can't take much away from that. But the more recent meeting that we've talked about, April 4th, just less than 2 weeks ago, 2 Thursdays ago, 109, 105, but they did have 118 points at halftime. So the first half was very high scoring, well over the pace, and they barely got there for the full game over the 210.5. But Miami only shot 41.5%. They were only 13 for 43, 30% from 3. The Sixers shot 47% from the field, only 1 by 4. They had a 16-point lead but they actually trailed entering the fourth quarter. They blew that 16-point lead from early in the game, and that was at Miami. So I don't know how much we can take away from it. One thing that did jump out is that the Sixers only got to the line 11 times despite winning the game on the road. They were 9 for 11. Miami was 14 for 16. So I think Miami's chances to try to ugly it up, like you're saying, slow it down. So I would think a Heat and under parlay is somewhat correlated if it plays out that way.
Well, it's Maxey and Embiid versus the Miami Heat, and can they get it done? It's a intriguing game, to say the least here. That'll be the first one up, and then I'm not sure. I've been looking, Brian Power. Somebody has to win this Bulls-Hawks game, right? Is that how it works? Somebody's got to come out with it. Okay, so in that case, let's talk about who's winning it here. Hawks and the Bulls, a game absolutely nobody wanted, and yet here we are, and I feel like we've known this game was coming for about the last month here, where these two were destined for a crash course. So talk to us, BP. If you were a betting man and you wanted to throw up while watching a game, which one of these teams would you be backing tonight?
Yeah, you bring up a good point, Joe, that this matchup's sort of been penciled in for a while now. So how much stock do you put in the late games down the stretch? Probably not much. Now, I can tell you, Atlanta didn't close well at all. Once they were resigned to getting the 10 seed, they knew they'd be playing this game on the road. They lost the last 6 regular season games. They're 1-6 ATS. In the final regular season game, they gave up 157 points to an Indiana team that needed to win to avoid the play-in tournament. And let me tell you what the trends say about that. Atlanta, and interesting to note, Steve mentioned how all the money came in on the totals, on the unders, yesterday. The 2 unders yesterday, and those were correct. It's been a little back and forth on the other game tonight, but this is the one game where we've seen over money show up, and that's understandable with Atlanta's awful defense, which I just mentioned gave up 157 points in the regular season finale. Well, this season, guys, the Hawks, off a double-digit loss, 3-17 against the number. After allowing 130 points in a game this year, they're 3-12 against the number. Simple math tells me that means they've given up over 130 points in 16 different games this season. That is awful. And obviously, they were the worst ATS team overall as well, were the Hawks. Young and Murray don't play well together. So I know in Atlanta, they're very excited that Trae Young's back, but I don't necessarily love when it's Young and Murray. I don't love the way that team plays, but Chicago, my issue is they're the lowest ceiling team in this whole deal, right? I mean, so I don't want to lay points with them. I would look to the over in this game. I know the under trend in playing games is very real, but who wants to bet an under when the Atlanta Hawks are required to play defense? Not me.
No, they can't even spell defense, much less play it. We are getting questions as whether or not DeRozan's daughter is going to be in attendance there. That is obviously a big handicapping angle there. That's a good question, Have. Big Daddy says there is absolutely no other way to play this game. And I agree. There is no way, Merril, I could sit there tonight and be like, man, I got to sweat out an under in this game where both teams, I will say this, though. For a game that meant absolutely nothing, I thought they laid it all out to try to beat the Knicks. I was pretty impressed with the effort there to take them to overtime. So, if nothing else, Chicago has shown an ability where, hey, they're playing hard. They want to roll into this game here on a W. There was no reason for them to play that game the way they did. They ended up losing anyway, but I would expect the same kind of effort here tonight, no?
They were definitely playing to win, and the Knicks locked up the 2 seed. It was more important for them, obviously, for positioning. The Bulls had nothing to gain whatsoever, and they take the Knicks to overtime. They lose 120-119, and I'm reading the press clippings after the game. It says DeMar DeRozan scored 30 points, but missed a short shot with 2.5 seconds left. He was crushed afterwards, even though the game had no bearing on the Bulls postseason, it says. And his quote was, everybody out there wanted to win, so I don't know. It felt like one of those games we were playing for something, and we are. first of all, the present in past tense makes no sense in that quotes.
Yes.
Like we were playing for something and we are. So I'm a little confused there. I think DeRozan was probably confused as well. But it's not a bad thing, I guess, that they're taking a non-playoff game serious. So we know they'll show up here tonight. The Hawks went down as one of the worst point spread teams in NBA history. And that was with a decent finish until, as you mentioned, Joe, they lost 6 in a row straight up. And they went 1-7 ATS their final 8. Or actually 2-7, 1-6 ATS their final 7. Finished the regular season 29-53 against the spread. And Bryan pointed out the worst subset of that is when they're coming off a blowout loss. So you don't want to ask a mediocre to bad team to do something good for you. This is a team that was 10 games below 500. They do not deserve to be in the postseason. The Bulls, 4 games below 500. We've seen a lot of 8 seeds over the years have losing records, so that's nothing new in the NBA. But a team 10 games below 500 should not be in the postseason, and Atlanta probably won't be. But I do think the total is the best way to attack this. I mentioned that the unders in general are the way to look in elimination games. And this is a true elimination game because they have to win. Otherwise, their season is over. They don't get a second chance like the Heat Sixers loser will. With that said, though, the unders work better with Class A and competitive teams. And these are 2 losing teams. So I do agree with that move to the over. And by the way, Atlanta is now 12-3 over their last 15 games finishing the regular season. So nothing has changed. They've been more of an over machine than ever. Yet this total is almost 18 points lower than just a month ago when the teams played. It makes absolutely no sense. It was priced because it's a playoff game, and that's why the early money came in and knocked it from 219 up to 222.5, even 223 now at the sharper books. And just using some raw math, the average score in the NBA this year is about 228 points a game. Bulls games average 226. That's 2 points below average. The Hawk games on average 239, 11 points above average. So that's a net 9 points above average. 228 plus 9 is 237. You can make an argument a fair total is 237 for a regular season game. So let's bump it a couple baskets, 233. Shoot, let's bump it 8 baskets. That's the high 220 range still. I mean, it's just, this total is way too low. And I know the regular season meeting that they just played had a total right in this price range. And in fact, it was. It closed around 221 on April 1st. And the team stayed under the total, just 214 points. But that was with Chicago at home against a terrible Hawk defense, shooting just 39% and only 25% from 3. The Hawks didn't do anything. The Bulls just didn't shoot well. If that happens again, the over's in trouble. But they've shoot anywhere near their norm, which I think they will. The over's the way to play this game tonight.
So we've got an over here, and a shout out to those of you joining us here live on the show. Hit that subscribe button. Don't forget the thumbs up. If you could, we'd certainly appreciate it. Also wanted to let you guys know that we did a earlier version of the NBA tip-off show that is posted. The links are in the description. And Andy Lang was all over a couple of props in this game that well worth checking out on how he is tackling both the Sixers and the Heat as well as this Atlanta Hawks and Chicago Bulls. So check that out, guys. That is in the description below. And we do want to send a shout out to Shane, I believe. Shane Sheldon in the house says the Bulls have the better team and home court. This is easy. I know a lot of people agreeing with you there, Shane. DC Capper says, what are we thinking about totals for this game? Well, I can tell you for this game, there is absolutely nobody here that is sweating out anything to do with a under in it. And I just don't see that happening there, BP. I do think there are going to be plenty of guys you can probably target with point props. I would also look at maybe even the first half over because I think both these teams are going to come out flying. You were so spot on without Trae Young. They slowed down. They actually showed some semblance of defense. Now that he is back on the court, he is not slowing down, and they are not going to play slower. So the tempo is going to increase, and I think DeRozan and company will have no problem going with them. Team totals for sure in this one as well, BP, you thinking? Oh, this is where we clap it out and we get to.
There we go. I'm back. I am unmuted, Joe.
Okay.
No, I'm okay with the hat. I don't want
frozen.
You're not supposed.
He was speechless. The hat left him speechless, literally.
Yes, you're not supposed to share hats, Joe. They teach you that in kindergarten.
Yes.
Anyway, but, okay. Yeah, let's talk about. Well, that's a different show for a different time, Steve. All right, let's talk about the first half. So Steve mentioned the most recent meeting, how the Bulls didn't shoot well and that game stayed under. But there were 114 total points scored in that game in the first half. And you look at the previous two meetings, you had 262 overall, 231 overall, and both first halves were pretty high scoring, 119, 116. So the first half total in this right now sitting at 113 and a half, 114, depending on your book. They've hit that in all three games. So again, you would imagine if this game's going to go over, it's going to be a result of some pace in the first half. Scoring tends to slow down late in these playoff games. So yeah, if you want to cut things in half, a first half over is not a bad look here because you look at the three regular season meetings between these teams up until the second half of that last meeting, they were scoring about 115 points per half anyway. So yeah, you got to think if you like the over, you probably imagine it's going to be a good start. So you want to cut it in half and just play the first half over? I ain't going to stop you.
No, I'm with you there. Real TV in the house. Shout out to you, along with Be Careful. Also, very interesting names on Instagram. I don't know if you guys have noticed this. Some of these names are, I swear to God, it's just as if they set up the Instagram account and accidentally spilled something on the keyboard and just like were that like none of these names make any friggin' sense on Instagram in any way, shape, or form. But it is a pleasure. I'll buy a vowel there, TJ. Thanks so much for stopping by. All right, so we've got Real TV in the house, loves both the Bulls team total and the Philadelphia team total over on points. I think we are all in agreement there. Leg Show says Aaron Judge is trash. What's the matter? You don't like the $165 batting average? What, you're not impressed for the $800 million he's making and can't hit water if he fell out of a boat? Yeah, no, I get it. And the worst part is he's going to run into the wall, stub his toe, and be out for 6 months again at some particular point. But don't get me started on that. We are putting too much weight on the regular season head-to-head games. Merril, what do you say to that when you look at these? All of these series coming up. How much weight do you put on the head-to-head series that we've seen some of these teams play or that we will see play coming up this weekend?
Well, first of all, with totals, not as much because, as I said, playoff games are a different animal. And on average for decades now, there's several baskets lower scoring than regular season games. So defensive intensity is normally there. That Bulls-Hawks game is the rare exception for all the reasons we've all talked about. They're two losing teams. The average score is well above what this total is priced at. Something else I'll point out about using regular season data, you got to make sure you're comparing apples to apples. You got to, like that Heat Sixers game 2 games ago last month, neither Butler or Embiid were in the lineup, the two most important players tonight. So you're basically looking at a preseason game then. So you got to make sure when you're looking at the regular season games, the key players were all playing. You also want to look at the scheduling situation. Was it a 3rd and 4 nights, no rest after playing in altitude for one of the teams also, and so everything is relative. But if all things check up, I do look at the regular season matchups. I'd say at 85% correlates. If the players are there, the situation was right. And it gives you a little bit of a jump start in the series. But then once the series starts, I know that doesn't apply tonight, but when we get to these 7-game series, the real playoffs this weekend, one of the reasons I've won consistently for 30 years in the NBA postseason is because the same angles, the same situational analysis works. The zigzag doesn't work on the blind, but the modified zigzag does. And that's because teams that don't do well in one game make adjustments, whereas the winning team doesn't need to. And speaking of player props, you kind of want to take a contrarian zigzag nature on those as well. Think about it. If a guy goes off for a game or two, they're going to look to shut him down, which opens something up for one of the other players. So I love to read between the lines, and that's why the NBA playoffs are such a great moneymaker, because we get anywhere from 5 to 7 games to work with every series.
Who doesn't love a good line, right, BP? Am I right? I mean, you look at each and every. Big shout out, by the way. I hope that answered the question there, Leg Show. You got to pick and choose some spots. I don't think totals is the best way to go, given the scheduling conflict. So I'm with Merril on that one there. The only question I have, and I'd love for those of you joining us here, drop it in the comment section if you're watching on the replay. The chat room, serious question here, if you could. I'd love to know Who is Jonte Porter betting on tonight? Does anybody have any idea? If you can, drop it in the chat. Drop it in the comment section, because I would love to know who Jonte is betting, because Toronto and himself are no longer available to fade here, BP. But this guy was some piece of work. I mean, you want to talk about you need a fall guy, but my goodness, he was the fall guy himself here. Now a lifetime. Do we have any lifetime bans in the NBA for gambling, guys? I don't think we do.
Not in my lifetime, we don't.
No, right?
No. I mean, I'm trying to think, like, is like a lifetime ban in the NBA. There were some wild fights in the 70s, the 19, like,
yeah.
I was going to make a joke there about what you had said a few minutes ago, Joe, but I'm not going to. But 1970s NBA, yes, exactly. There were some like wilds, and that was like the wild West. And I want to say somebody got like a lifetime ban. Somebody did get banned in the 70s for gambling in the set. I'm going to look that up.
No, in the NBA.
I've got the
Merril,
list
do
for
you
you right
remember?
now.
You played in the 70s, Merril, with that hair. Go ahead. Oh, drug related.
Yeah, I think Will Ferrell came close to getting one for the Tropics or whatever. But Michael Ray Richardson, drug related, 1986. Stanley Roberts, LSU's Stanley Roberts. I recall that very well. 1999, drug related.
Yes,
and
that's all
Donald
drug related.
Sterling, 2014, racist remarks. That one intrigues me. So I don't know what that's all about. But there's actually, it's telling me there's 20 more rows here. So there's several of them. OJ Mayo. He's a
I don't think for gambling, though. For gambling?
No, not for gambling. No, you're exactly right. I'm not seeing anything for gambling.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm looking at it right now. Ralph Beard, point shaving, 51. Roger Brown, 1951, gambling. Both of them were in 1951. So, Joey, point shaving. Alex Gorza, 1951. Woo! 1951 must have been a hell of a season for the NBA and bookmakers around the country.
54, there was another guy, too. I want to see if there's anybody. Roy Tarpley. I remember that was in my list, but that was another drug one.
Yeah, that was drug. I remember
that was another drug
1995.
One.
Yeah, there's 4 or 5 in 1951, guys. I'm surprised there hasn't been a book or movie made about that. And Doug Moe, 1961. Wasn't Doug Moe a coach 20, 30 years later?
Yeah,
I think of a different
absolutely.
Those were some fun Denver Nuggets teams when they had the cool skyline as the logo. Alex English, they scored like 140 points and gave up 130 a game. Yeah, he was the coach in the mid 80s.
Oh, I'm sorry, hey guys. There's a lot of these guys have been reinstated. About half of these guys were reinstated, and Mo is one of them. So that makes sense
because
now.
they didn't have the proper fall guy in the 50s and 60s, and that's what happened. But neither did Jonte either. And by the way, Big Daddy says Jonte embarrassing the city of Toronto right now, his hometown. Shout out to you, Big Daddy here. And Shane brings up a good point. We should probably ask Donahue. Isn't that? But that's sort of lifetime ban, but not the player side. But yes, well done, Shane. Yeah. Big shout out, by the way. DC Capper is on his way, going to the casino in the next few minutes. He's actually on his way there. One player on my card so far: Philadelphia -5. Do you agree with that? Don't know about the Atlanta-Chicago game. Your opinion on that side play in that game? I think the consensus for us, BP, was that we did like the total more than the side, but if anything, I would have to go with Chicago at home, no?
Well, yeah, for the Philly game, I like the total there. I like the over in both the games, to be honest. I like the total far more than the side in those games. Yep. I think these games were lined appropriately at the open. And as I mentioned when we broke down Fit, I wasn't running to bet Philly at 4.5, so I'm certainly not running to bet them now at 5.5. And as you pointed out, we think that number could continue to move. But I know, again, you respect the trends, what they say, playoff basketball, specifically the short sample size that is these play-in tournaments. I just think these two totals, the Miami-Philadelphia total just on a whole is too low, and then the Chicago-Atlanta total is too low because Atlanta is involved, and Atlanta is very, very bad defensively, giving up over 120 points per game. The only concern I would have, I guess, with the total is Chicago plays slow, so if they were to build a lead, the over might be in trouble there. But, we were talking about first half overs anyway. Maybe another reason to look at the first half over in the Chicago-Atlanta game.
Yes.
Just in case you don't have to worry about the Bulls taking the air out of the ball.
Yep, I agree with you on there. I think I am probably going to go to a triple overtime because the NBA hates us and gave us this debacle of a game to begin with here. Shout out to anybody who's got, what is that? Got Blue Cheese. Got Blue Cheese. Outstanding stuff, by the way. Looking for 2 or more threes, 2+ threes from Embiid tonight. I love that because he'll take them. We know that. That's actually pretty cool. And he's also going with Kobe White, 20 points over his line there of 20 points. That would not shock me in the least bit there. So we've got 2 games tonight. Should be interesting. And just so we know, Merril, so the folks that are watching and tuning in here, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button or the thumbs up. We'd certainly appreciate it. The winner of this game moves on to play who? And then, of course, we've got the loser who, in all likelihood, in that 9-10 game, which, flip a coin there with Chicago and Atlanta, they're going to have to play the loser of the Miami and Philly game. So who does it benefit, man? Who's sitting there waiting for the better matchup, do you think?
Well, the winner of the second game plays the loser of the third game who plays UConn afterwards. That's something a lot of people don't realize, the way this format works.
Playing UConn. Yes.
No, it's same as last night. The 7-8 teams play tonight. The winner is automatically the 7 seeds. Whoever wins the Miami Philly game becomes the 7 seed. They get the New York Knicks. So the other team that loses has a chance still to become the 8 seed because they have to beat the Bulls-Hawks winner. The Bulls-Hawks cannot do any better than the 8 seed. It's either the 8 seed or out. And they have to play the Celtics. So I know everybody wants to win. It's interesting, Joe, though. I do that daily video, and I got hundreds of comments yesterday. I love the support. Comment below. We read them. We reply back. Several people before the Laker game last night in my video did say, will the Lakers tank to avoid playing Denver sooner? And they'd rather fall to number 8 and get OKC instead of, the Denver-Minnesota bracket. Obviously, it didn't play out that way. And you're playing with fire if you do that. That does not apply tonight because the winner gets the easier matchup. So this is how it should be. I don't think it's really part of the handicap at all. I just would be surprised to see either Atlanta or Chicago make the postseason. So I think even the loser tonight's going to get in, but they would have to play the Celtics instead of the Knicks. And the Bulls and Hawks game is the NCAA tournament. It's a one and done. You must win to advance, and then you got to keep winning after that. This isn't quite that with Miami Philly, but I point that out because 3-point random variance is so prevalent in the NCAA tournament, and it makes it madness. That's why we call it March Madness. The 2 road teams tonight, technically, Miami and Atlanta, are the better 3-point shooting teams. So we could see upsets again. We saw it last night with the Kings. Kings shot, I think, like 17 for 37 from 3-point range. They won easily at home. So these one-and-done games, anything can happen. And like Bryan was saying, we don't have a large sample size. We've seen some craziness. And that's why I'm treading very lightly until we get to the real playoffs, which is the 7-game series starting on Saturday.
Yeah, amen to that. All right, guys, we do have, unfortunately, 2 more games we got to get through. And then, of course, the fun truly begins here this weekend. And we've got much more to cover. But again, we told you we did an NBA tip-off show earlier today. It's posted on the WagerTalk YouTube page. The link is in the description. Andy Lang with a great breakdown of these games with prop betting, if that's the direction you want to go. Make sure you check out that video there. And then, of course, we'll be back again tomorrow with a Thursday edition once we clear all the smoke and the crack that Mr. Thornhill is doing, which he said he'd much rather do than watch this Hawks-Chicago game. And I can't argue with him at that particular point. We'll put it all together. We'll come up with a few ways that we can go ahead and approach maybe a couple of series or 2. We'll do that tomorrow. Take a look at some of these head-to-head matchups. And, of course, you don't have to wait because all you can do is just go ahead and hit the video on your screen right now as we've got plenty to say on these upcoming matchups in the NBA playoff. Hit that video and then come back and join us again tomorrow. We'll see you again soon.